Welcome back to the Industrial Transformation Podcast. I am Jeremy Frank of KCF Technologies, and I have the pleasure of sitting down today with Meaghan Ziemba, who is a real thought leader in arguably one of the most important topics facing manufacturing and industry today, which is attracting younger people and specifically attracting women into the workforce. I think we've all realized how important that is. Meaghan has created Mavens of Manufacturing, which is a live video broadcast series that combines women empowerment, brand storytelling, and the amazing world of manufacturing. Welcome to the show, Meaghan.
Thank you, Jeremy. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic today. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. It's getting sunny here in the Midwest and a little bit warmer, so I'm really excited about that because during these months we never know if we're going to get snow or rain, and so I'm pretty excited for the warm weather because I get sick of the cold real quick.
Absolutely. This spring in particular, I think, is a long time coming and everybody's ready for it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So your four topics, at least, I think what I understand is the main goals of Mavens of Manufacturing is really four big things. One is just bringing awareness about manufacturing and how important it is, and then secondly, getting younger people excited about it and into it.
Mhm.
Third, specifically women, attracting women into this space that we all know is exciting, but not everybody does. And then lastly, having a platform for allowing women who are in manufacturing to share their stories and share their voice and their actions. Can you just give us from? I'd love to hear from your point of view. Why this is so important and what those four things are. Why they're the goals of what you're doing.
Yeah, so I started Mavens in Manufacturing almost 2 years ago, and one was just because I miss doing interviews with multiple people. I'm a technical writer by trade. I started writing for manufacturing in 2008, and I started out in the trade publication industry, which gave me a wonderful opportunity to talk to a lot of different companies and learn about how they were creating their products and services and why. And just hearing and seeing the passion that most of them had was really addicting for me. I really enjoyed seeing how the design process and the development process took place and the products that they were creating, how they were changing people's lives for the better. It was just really fun and interesting for me. And I've always been naturally curious on how things were made and why they were made and how things work in the world. And so it was a perfect fit for me. During that time when I was getting invited to trade shows to interview people at their booths, I did notice that I was one of very few women on the trade show floor. And fast forward to today, I have a daughter who's graduating. She's 18. She's actually going into nursing. And with my natural curiosity, I just naturally kind of stuck my nose where it didn't belong, and I snooped in on some of her conversations that she was having with her friends, and all of them are going to 4 year colleges to pursue higher education and degrees like marketing, customer service, medical, or teaching, or something sports related, which is fine. But none of them are really talking about engineering or manufacturing, and I wanted to know why. And I also wanted to know why they were thinking that pursuing a 4 year college degree education was the only way that they were going to be successful, because a lot of them seemed like they were carrying that burden from being pressured into their by their parents, which was something that happened to me when I was going through high school. I always tested well in English, so I was always told that I was going to be an English teacher, which didn't sound really exciting for me. So by the time I got to college, I didn't really know what I wanted to do, and I almost flunked out twice. I got pregnant with my daughter and decided that I needed to figure out what I wanted to do, and that's how I found technical writing. But uh, I feel like it's important to, inspire the next generation of women, because we're still at a low percentage. I think the last report that I read from Deloitte said that we were around 25 to 26%. But then the Women in Manufacturing group, they did a study with another organization, and we were up like 33%, so a little bit better. But then when you break it down into disciplines, we're still around the 1 to 2% across all of the disciplines. So I really wanted to just provide this platform to showcase what career opportunities are available, because it's not just the dirty, dark, dangerous career pathways anymore. This isn't our father's engineering or manufacturing sector anymore. It's not our grandfather's engineering or manufacturing sector anymore. There's a lot of high tech technologies going on. So I really wanted to create Mavens to showcase those opportunities, but I also wanted to inspire the next generation, specifically women, because yeah, we're still struggling to get those numbers up. And I think it's important that we do that because engineering and manufacturing, if you don't have a strong foundation, it can actually be considered a national security threat. And I come from a small community, and we had four major manufacturing companies when I was in high school. And by the late 90s, early 2000s, three of them actually shut down, and one actually decreased their workforce by half, I think, or almost half. And it really hurt our community. Our poverty levels went up, unemployment levels went up. People were moving out of the city to go to other places where jobs were available, and it really hurt us economically. And it wasn't until probably about 6 or 7 years ago that an individual came in and invested a lot of their money and time in building back up our community. And now that we're having all of these manufacturers come back in, our community is becoming stronger and more economically stable. And I think that's true across the United States, here in America, and even in any other country. You can look at other countries who have strong manufacturing bases, and they're successful economically as well too, and they're thriving.
Yeah.
So I just feel like if we don't fix the skills gap issue, it's going to hurt us in the long run, and it's going to become a national security threat, and that's not good. We don't want that to happen.
Right. Yeah, that it's something I talk about a lot in our company. So my similar story, my family grew up, well, my father grew up in Mansfield, Ohio, and my grandfather worked at the premier Westinghouse facility, making appliances like post World War II. That was the company town, and similarly, they went through a period where it lost its competitive edge. It has left, shut down in the '90s, and left a big economic hole in that town in Mansfield, Ohio. And I think you're right. That
Hmm.
story is all across the board, and it's something. It's very personal for me. I think it's personal for a lot of people. It's neat that you've seen that turnaround. So that you use the word addictive. Well, you use the word addicted to the stories of. I just wanted to break down the kind of these four things. The first one is just generally bringing awareness to manufacturing to if it's a national security aspect or if it's just an economic aspect, it's both, I think. But
Hmm.
to improve our competitive edge relative to the rest of the world, but also just to enable prosperity in our communities.
Hmm.
So that's your goal. um, Maybe can we talk a little bit about both, like, what the real problem there is, and is it getting better or worse? What's happening right now from what you see. You've done 60 some of these interviews now that you've been doing Mavens of Manufacturing. What are you hearing? What are you seeing?
Yeah, so right now, and it's not just in the United States that I'm seeing or hearing about this. There's other countries that are experiencing the same thing, but we're experiencing this skills gap or lack of workforce. I've talked to other individuals who are calling it a training gap, meaning, we've haven't prioritized the trade skills as much as we prioritize other areas of academics or learning or knowledge. And I see that when I was in high school, I wasn't ever told or aware of the opportunities in the VOTech area because of where I was testing well. I was testing well in English, not math and science. I'm okay with science. Math, I'm still using my fingers till this day to add and subtract. I'm terrible at it. Um, and I feel like skills trades have been put on the back burner for a really long time, and now we're starting to see the effects of that. And if we don't start closing the skills gap, you know, companies are going to have a really hard time finding talented workers. There's this thing now that people are calling, I've heard several terms for it. They're calling it the gray wave or the silver tsunami.
Right.
And it's a bunch of workers in the manufacturing sector that are getting ready to retire. And with that retirement, unfortunately, they're going to be taking all of that knowledge that they've learned on the machines that they're using and the skills that they're using. And without that knowledge, it's really difficult for the next generation to kind of pick up those basic skills, I think. And if you don't have these opportunities set up between mentors and apprenticeships, I like to call it, the Jedi and their what are they called, Padawans? Yeah,
Yeah.
the Jedi's and the masters and the Padawans. If you don't have those relationships built up, it's going to be really hard to pass that knowledge down from next generation, and we're actually going to lose that knowledge, which is a scary thing. Um, even though we're advancing in all of these technologies, we still need the basic understanding of those soft skills to progress forward. And a lot of companies that I've talked to, a lot of leadership that I've talked to, they're all saying the same thing. Like, we're having a really hard time getting talented people through the doors to run these machines or to weld these components together. And it's scary because if they can't find the employees or the workers to do those things, they're going to start turning down jobs. A gentleman that I talked to in Wisconsin, he actually turned down $1 million order because he did not have the workers to fill that order. And he is like, never in my business career did I ever think I would say no to $1 million. And here I am today saying, no, I can't take this order for you. So
Now,
it's really scary.
well, especially so it's interesting because it's scary, but also optimistic at the same time. I mean, we see it too. So, right in the Midwest, where you are, we're in Pennsylvania. It's it varies across the country, across the world, but in the Midwest, a lot of auto manufacturing is big. Obviously in Michigan, but also in Ohio, in Indiana, in Kentucky, Tennessee, and a lot. The pandemic and supply chain shortages is driving this impetus to do more manufacturing here and commit to
Hmm.
it. Organizations and a lot of nations are realizing the importance of that. So it's actually going to put more pressure, not less, on those, more of those $1 million orders, those opportunities. And yet,
Hmm.
I mean, I know the number that really stuck in my head is in Kentucky, like right in the middle of the Midwest. A lot of this manufacturing is happening in Kentucky. The workforce participation rate is only 53%, as a lot of those people are aging out, and people are just not. And that's across the board in manufacturing. It's just particularly stressed for the reasons you've said. So what I want to ask there is, do you see some optimism? Like, theoretically, if you can get your word out, we can get our word out. There is this impetus to do more of this here and to recognize the importance of it, and then people will be drawn and realize how awesome it is and be drawn to it and match that. So it's a good story hypothetically, but only if it works. So what do you think?
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons why I love doing what I'm doing with Mavens, because I'm hearing all of these great stories, but I'm also seeing a lot of proactiveness from certain individuals who are putting their boots to the ground. As a gentleman that I met, his name is Matt Goosey. He says, "Put your boots to the ground." And one of the guests that I've had on, her name is Kathy Miller. No, she's the author of Steel Boots and Stilettos. The Kathy that I'm talking about is Kathy Walker. Sorry, there's so many Kathys that I know. But Kathy Walker, you mentioned Kentucky. She's in Kentucky, and she started a Haas uh, technical space called eCami. So she started out in banking and financing, and she started to see that coal mining was on the way out. So Kentucky is known for a lot of their coal mines. She started noticing right away that it was on its way out and that all of these workers were going to be out of a job if they didn't upskill or learn something new, um, to better themselves and move forward with a new opportunity. So she knew that CNC machining was becoming more and more popular. So she um, did did the groundwork, and she talked to a lot of leadership within the community. She got connected with Haas, and she started this eCami facility, and she brought in those coal miners, and she started teaching them about CNC machining. And now they're starting to integrate a lot of the robotic stuff too, and they do additive manufacturing. And she's a great individual to talk to. And she said, she's like, you know, there's the basic academics of some of these manufacturing processes, and she's like, you need to have that one-on-one with some of these older generations. And what she's doing is she's bringing the older generations with the younger generations so that the two generations can teach each other. So the younger generations are very tech savvy, and that's where a lot of this stuff is going. It's going into programming and automation and industrial internet of things, and we hear things about like smart factories and stuff. It's a lot of coding involved, a lot of technical skills that you need, which the younger generation seems to be a lot more savvy than the older generation. So the younger generation at her facility is teaching the older generation about some of these newer technologies, and then the older generations are bringing those traditional skills to the younger generation and teaching them about that. So it's a great setup because she's developing these mentorships and the generations are learning from each other. And then uh, these individuals are getting sought out by manufacturing companies before they even finish the program, because of the skill sets that she's helping create within these individuals. So I'm seeing a lot of stories like that where more people are becoming proactive in their communities because they understand now the importance of having a strong manufacturing base. So there's a lot of companies that are doing things like First Robotics. They're sponsoring teams. Some are bringing in more high school students to see what their factory floors are like and actually showing what a manufacturing career can look like. Some are volunteering their time, but it's not enough. Like we still need to connect people because some manufacturers I think are still kind of behind in how they're marketing themselves as a company to their communities. They're still focused on getting that next lead or that next buy when they should be focusing sometime within their community outreach stuff, because if you don't have people supporting your brand, it's really going to hard to do that word of mouth and like support what you're making within that community. So I think they still need to shift a little bit of their marketing stuff to community outreach and getting connected with kids, especially in families, to show them, hey, this is what we're making, this is why we're making it, and get that sense of pride back within manufacturing that we saw back in the 40s during World War II. And that's the era of Rosie the Riveter. There was such a sense of pride in what we were doing on a manufacturing basis that everyone pulled together and we actually thrived during that era and created a lot of good stuff. So we need to bring that sense of pride back, I think.
Yeah, it's funny. I've seen the a couple of things you touched on, but all the way back to coal mining. The just one of my the most interesting. I've seen a lot of interesting people, and so we're doing industrial Internet of Things into all this manufacturing. So the technology wave, we're a big part of that. But there's a gentleman. His name's Willie Bagley, and he was a coal miner in Eastern Kentucky. He's actually from the town Hazard, Kentucky, that according to him, is the town that the Dukes of Hazzard was actually based on. The town was in Kentucky, not where it was based in the show. And he grew up there. He was a coal miner, and he saw those same winds of change coming. And he left there, and then ended up having a pretty long, like maybe a 20-year career in the auto industry. The interesting
Hmm.
thing to me is that he represented that he just retired last year, but he was extremely high performance. He was revered for his expertise. He also loved coal mining. I was surprised. You think of that as going down doing a dirty job with a shovel, and it was very much not that. It was clean, it was very high tech, and his skills in coal mining translated marvelously to auto manufacturing, and that led him to be really recognized and valued in the organization that he was in. He was in Toyota, incidentally, in Kentucky. But so he then also, that's great, but he represents part of the silver tsunami, right? So what about young people in these communities? What are you seeing actually works to get people excited about the Rosie the Riveter type of rallying in the story? Young people, and then specifically women, because there's both the skills gap but then also the gender gap. What
Hmm.
do you see actually works? What is it that gets people addicted to it or resonates?
Actually getting in front of them and talking to them about it and the opportunities that are available and educating them on what modern manufacturing is. So they're not going to know if they don't see it. And I feel like there's a disconnect with the not just the high schools, because I feel like we need to expose them at younger ages before they even get into high school. But that's hard to do, especially within families who might not have a manufacturing or engineering influence already internally. So, like myself, my dad has been in manufacturing my entire life. I knew that he traveled a lot. I didn't necessarily know what for. I knew that he enjoyed math a lot and he was some sort of engineer, but he never really talked to us about what he did for a job. Um, we didn't really get close with manufacturing and engineering until I actually started Mavens. I worked with him once when he was the president of sales for a machining tool company. I worked in the shipping department, and I swore I would never work with him again because it was just a different person from what I knew, and it was really hard for me to be like, yeah, okay, sir, because we never had that dynamic before. But when I started Mavens, he was like, well, what is this? Why are you doing this? And I explained to him my mission and why I wanted to do it. And he's like, this company did really good with highlighting their Rosie the Riveter history. And I worked for this company, and this company has really good executive leadership um, filled with women, and he started connecting with me on that level because he understands the importance of having a strong manufacturing foundation for economic stability. So he got really excited that I was doing this, and that's when we became close. But there's other families out there who don't know what engineering or manufacturing is per se, or they just don't understand the effect that it has on a community as a whole. So if you are from a community that's not very economically stable to begin with, you might not have the same opportunities compared to a community that's thriving. So you're not going to have these specific programs that target certain areas. You're just going to go through a school system, and they're not really going to have that education available, unfortunately. And I only know about this because my sister was a teacher um, in some really poor areas, and the differences in resources that they had available to them compared to a community that was thriving was just really unfortunate and sad to know about. So I feel like we need to start at younger ages, and we need to get everybody in the community involved, and manufacturers need to be more proactive with their time, especially. So volunteer your time, go to the high school, go to the middle school, go to the elementary school, see what your community is doing for specific days like manufacturing day or engineering day, and then create an event around that. Sponsor a robotics team. If your community doesn't have a robotics team, how can you make one? And just take it from there and start building these plans. And that's something that I'm doing within my own community. I'm actually going to the high school and I'm asking them, okay, what are your pain points? Where are you struggling with getting people excited about these VOTEC programs? And you mentioned the supply chain issues that we're having right now. The woman that I'm speaking with, her name is Deborah Prowse. She's like, everybody's talking about the effects that they're feeling from the supply chain issues. She's like, we're feeling them 10 times as much because we don't have these materials now that fall within our budget because they only get a certain amount for their budget. She's like, now that these prices are skyrocketing, she's like, that affects our budget. And most of our teachers are pulling things like
Mm.
paying for these out of pocket for their supplies so that they can keep the class going. Because if they don't have the resources or the supplies, it's hard to keep the class going. And then if they can't bring the students in, they're going to lose the course, and then their budget's going to get allocated somewhere else. And once you lose that budget, it's really hard to get it back again. So they're struggling with teachers because teachers are retiring, and tech ed teachers are a major puzzle to all of this. And if you can't find a skilled tech ed teacher, it's going to be really hard to keep those courses as well too. So I think it's just a variety of things that we all need to talk about within our own communities and build a strategy from there and get leadership involved, get families involved, get all of the educational institutions involved, and build some sort of plan so that you're promoting or exposing the trade skills at much younger ages so that it's something kids are exposed to from the time they get into school, from the time that they leave. That's just my personal opinion. And from all the conversations that I've had, that's what I think will work is building a strategy from the time they get into kindergarten and strengthening it as they go through school.
as they move through the whole program. Yes,
Yeah.
and that's going to be hard and take time. And I definitely you
It's
see
not, it's
that, and there's
definitely
people
not an
working on it.
overnight fix, you
It's
know,
hard.
it's not an overnight fix. It's going to take time and it's going to take, persistence and patience because it's not going to be something we can do tomorrow. It's definitely going to take some time.
What intrigues me though is I see the in the meantime what you're already doing with Mavens of Manufacturing is you're fast tracking that to some extent in that you've just in the 2 years you've been doing it, you've interviewed some 60 professionals, mostly women but not all, who have
Mhm.
done something, and you can hold them up as stories and you can share it. You don't have to revamp the whole uh, school system in order to be able to share these stories and get them out on YouTube and other social media. And so I think that's great. I know I just give you major like kudos for what you're doing because it seems like a way to fast track, and it should accelerate, the not only the importance of kind of resetting the structures, but also showing how to do it, what actually works. That's what I was
Mhm.
curious to ask you about, the from the people that you've talked to so far, what's a highlight, what really stands out as somebody that you've talked to that you think, man, if every 6-year-old girl could just hear this story, then she would get it and would be excited about this.
There have been so many. So, um, Allison Giddens, she's in Georgia. She's the owner or co-owner of WinTech, which is an aerospace company. Just her energy and her vibe is infectious. She has such a great attitude, and she actually developed her own internship. It's a virtual internship program. So she initially just started it for the Georgia area, and then it actually became national, and then it became global because someone recommended a student that they knew in another country, and she's like, "Yeah, let's do it." So she didn't like hesitate to accept something out of her comfort zone, and I think that's really exciting to see, especially from someone in leadership. It shows that she cares about the industry she's in. She knows that there's a lack of talented workers, so she actually was proactive and did something about it. And I'm really excited because I get the opportunity to judge her the projects after they're done with the summer program that she's developing this year. She sent out a request for judges, and I can't wait to hear from these kids because when she did it last year, some of the projects that she mentioned, I was just like, where did they come up with those ideas? And I think that's cool because kids don't have those boundaries yet from so many years of training. They're still in that kind of risk taking, mood where they don't really have, oh, I can't do this because this is what I was taught or this is what I learned. They're still experimenting and just taking risk. Another one, I did mention Kathy Miller. Uh, she and Shannon Carell, they wrote this book called Steel Toes and Stilettos, which I just think is fantastic analogy with the many different types that women own. And they talked about their journey together as co-workers because Shannon worked under Kathy throughout their career. And it was just a really interesting story about their friendship. And I think that's important to see women getting along with each other in such a male dominated industry. And if we can develop more scenarios like that, I think it's really great. Nikki Gonzalez was another really good one. She works for Quote Beam, and she's worked with companies like Keyence, and she's a huge robotics and automation evangelist. And right now, she's working on several DEI efforts to make Quotebeam a more diverse employer for new workers. And she's just gets involved with everything. And she and Ali G is what I know her as. Her name is Alicia. Alicia, I'm so sorry. I'm going to pronounce your last name wrong. It's Gillipin, I think, her last name. but they're starting an Automation Ladies podcast because they want to show what automation is and how it is to be a woman in automation. And yeah, there's just so many to count. I actually interviewed two Rosie the Riveters, one Dolly Marshall, and then Frances. And I interviewed a Rosebud, which is actually a granddaughter or daughter of a Rosie the Riveter. As I found out, her name is Yvonne. And just hearing the pride that they had doing what they did back in the 40s, I think is important to keep that history. So there's there's really too many to count. I'm interviewing Cara Branch, who's actually the founder of Black Girls Do Engineer, which I think is amazing. So she is a chemical engineer by trade. She's worked with some really major companies. She has three daughters, and she told me, she's like, my 9-year-old came up to me and said she wanted to be a software engineer. What 9-year-old wants to do that unless they had some sort of inspiration from a family member? And she happened to be that inspiration for her daughter. So she's like, I didn't want her to go through this sector like I did, thinking that there was no one else that looked like me involved in this sector. So she created Black Girls Do Engineer, and she's in her third year, and she already has like 3 or 4 chapters in the United States. And she started out with 20 or 30 girls, and now they have well over 200. So it's just stories like that that I get really excited about because it's showing that, there are people there that care and they're doing what they can. So now if we can all just work together and help out these individuals pursue some of their activities that they're trying to do, I think we can, like you said, fast track it a little bit quicker so that we can really start closing the skills gap and decrease those numbers. Because I think Deloitte said by 2030, it's supposed to be 2.1 million jobs that are going to be left vacant within engineering and manufacturing. So I really hope we can start decreasing that and make it less than 2 million.
Yeah. I mean that's a hopefully zero. I mean, hopefully we can match it, you know, but
Yeah.
rallying people towards it. And the start, I love that you could just rattle off, 5, 7 of those ones that resonate. It's just so clear that that really resonates and that you're doing something that you're really passionate about. The
I just feel bad because there's so many great women out there, and it's just, me not having, when I'm on the spot, it's hard for me to like name everyone out loud. But if you've been on Mavens, I appreciate you because yeah, they're just doing great things and they're really humble about it and they love doing what they do. And some of them have had really negative experiences within, not all of them, but some of them have had really negative experiences because they are women. And whether that was like, being talked to a certain way or disregarded a certain way. But that didn't stop them from pursuing what they wanted to do. And I'm glad that it didn't because they're doing some really amazing things within the sector.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I actually had the Kathy Miller, the Steel Toes and Stilettos. I haven't read the book yet, but I did listen to your interview, and it was just fascinating just to hear the real stories of what they went through on their path and their journey, and how they both she and Shannon could relate
Yeah.
to other people. What you're going to encounter things like this, and it's. I mean, it was impactful. It was just some serious challenges that were more than what. Anyway, I won't give away the preview, but to the audience here, please go watch these episodes because there's just fascinating stuff there that we can all learn from. But particularly, I think younger people can get excited about manufacturing, be less intimidated by it, and also women in particular can be excited about it and less intimidated by it if we can connect
Yeah,
those gaps.
absolutely.
Yeah. Matter of fact, I was just talking to somebody. I was talking to a young engineer from Ford just this morning, um, and I asked him a question that relates to that. Is just what do you see happening within a big company, a big manufacturing company? What he pointed to is kind of the same idea, but resource groups, but like peer groups within the company, where you'll have women who have risen into leadership roles, but taking a really dedicated effort to connect those dots and share those stories. Is
Hmm.
what he said is really that's what's working. But for you to be doing that across this whole diversity of the American industrial workforce is, I think, just fascinating.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for doing it on behalf of the world, because we can't go to 2030 with a 2.1 million dollar workforce gap. It's just I'm
Yeah, we
close to
can't.
these things. It's not tenable. I mean, the bad things will happen, and it's something that I believe will get fixed, but it has to. Which
Yeah.
actually is that's the maybe the thing I want to ask you uh, is and maybe you just said it, but I'd like to just to hear it for like the biggest thing, so there's 25, 27% of the workforce is women. Maybe it's 30%, but it's not half, and the overall workforce is half. Particularly within manufacturing, there's this shortage, potentially getting worse. But those aren't the only problems, and there's other problems. But from your point of view, what you're seeing, what is the one that you really want to fix the most? What is the problem that you're most motivated around in what you do?
So here in the United States, and I've also have talked about it with some Canadian manufacturers, but it is generally a pretty white sector,
Hmm.
and it's pretty male dominated still. And I know this is an uncomfortable topic for some to have, which I'm always left asking why it's uncomfortable, but I really just want to diversify manufacturing and engineering as much as possible. I think it's a sector for anyone who likes working with their hands, who has a natural curiosity of how things work, who likes, problem solving challenges, who, there's so many different areas within engineering and manufacturing. There's a couple women that I talked to on Mavens who started out in interior design and then they ended up in manufacturing. And I think that's a cool connection because a lot of people forget that there is that design aesthetic portion. Just because you can manufacture something, just because you can engineer something, doesn't necessarily mean you can manufacture something as easy. And you still have to make it look good, right? Like with cell phones and stuff. A lot of people grab a cell phone because of how it looks initially, or if it's a piece of clothing. We're all driven by our sense of vision in a sense, or well, most of us. We're driven by how things look, so you have to take those in consideration. But yeah, I feel like the more diverse we can make the sector, the more innovation we can grow to. And it's because, we all have our life experiences. We all have gone through trauma a certain way, through loss a certain way, through wins a certain way. We all think about things in a different way. And when you combine that collaboration with different life experiences, that's where you get the best innovation, in my opinion.
Hmm.
That's where you get the best thought process and the best brainstorming session. Uh, when you have the same group of people from project to project to project, things can get a little redundant, and then you kind of miss out on that innovation part of things. You won't think of things as creatively. So that's one of the reasons why I like working with different manufacturing groups because it's different groups of people, it's different sets of people, and I learn more that way instead of just working with one group of people when I'm writing things.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, I think that's the biggest thing that I would like to fix is just bringing more different types of people within engineering and manufacturing.
Yeah, it seems so obvious and straightforward when you say it, but it's hard to get from here to there, and I don't think anybody would disagree that it would be better. Yet it's not happening. So that's maybe the last question I have is, so you're personally devoting your life to this, um, and in a large way, I am too. My whole company is about bringing the technology wave, but the technology is only as good as the people that are using it. And so that diverse,
Hmm.
open-minded, fully participatory workforce is necessary. But for you, the last question is just, where do you think we're going to be in 2030? So Deloitte says we're going to be 2.1 million people short, and it's going to maybe be similar to what it is now. But we want it to be fully diverse, equal participation across gender and race and all aspects of diversity. Where do you actually think we're going to be 8 years from now?
I'm optimistic that we're going to, so you said 8 years from now. One of my mentors, when I first started out in Mavens, I was scared out of my mind because I was like, I have no idea what I'm doing. I've never done video editing. I've never done any of this stuff. And the line that stuck with me from him was, as long as you're 1% better from what you did yesterday, you're on the right track. He's like, don't try to shoot for 50%. Don't try to shoot for 80%. As long as you're 1% better from the day before, you're on the right track to grow. So if we can do 1% better every single day for the next 8 years, I think that's a pretty healthy way to move forward. You don't want to stay stagnant. You don't want to fall back. You don't want to take a step backwards. So I think if we can just work together and do what we can do every single day, knowing that it's 1% better than the day we did before, we're on the right track to decreasing that number.
Love
So
that.
again, it's going to take a village. It's not an overnight fix, and it's going to take a lot of work, a lot of patience. And, sometimes it's going to be opportunities where there's not going to be any compensation in return for those doing it. Like I mentioned volunteer work. I think a lot of us need to just volunteer our time when we don't want to, because, not everything of value comes out of paid opportunities, in my opinion. I think if we can start volunteering some of our time and not always looking for that compensation in return, that's a good thing to start too.
Certainly. Yeah, I love that 1% better every day. It's just it sounds very much like a continuous improvement mindset, and
Yeah.
it's a proven path. It works. Well, that's great, Meaghan. I
Yeah.
really appreciate everything that you're doing with Mavens of Manufacturing. We'll certainly get our people paying attention to it. We have a lot of uh, diversity and a lot of female engineers working in our company. Maybe some of them would be good interviews for you one day. But we'll certainly
Yeah,
share this and
absolutely.
help you get your message out going forward. And mainly, I just appreciate what you're doing and you taking the time to share the story about Mavens of Manufacturing with us today. And this is the Industrial Transformation Podcast. I'm Jeremy Frank. Meaghan, anything you'd like to say in closing?
Yeah, just thank you for having me on to talk about Mavens of Manufacturing, the things that I love doing. For those of you who want to be a guest, I have mavensofmanufacturing.com as a website. There's a scheduling link down there. I'd love to chat with you. Otherwise, I'm also on LinkedIn. Feel free to connect or follow me. Again, my goal is to get so many people excited about engineering manufacturing the way that I'm excited about it. And especially if you're a student and you have no idea what you want to do for the rest of your life or when you grow up, feel free to connect with me because I have a lot of connections and I would love to get you connected with someone who might inspire you to join the sector.
Wonderful. Thanks so much. Again, it's Meaghan Ziemba of Mavens of Manufacturing, and this is the Industrial Transformation Podcast. Thanks so much.